Madison, Wisconsin, Republican Governor Scott Walker. If you had to find a bright spot in the president's speech last night, what would it be?
Well, I think Chuck's right. Trade certainly is an area where I think there's agreement amongst parties, or at least many people amongst political parties. Certainly in the speech, the words I heard that we agreed with was his acclaim for the men and women of the United States military, his talk about standing with the people of France and others around the world. Those are things I actually mentioned in my address here in Madison to our state capitol, and got responses positive from both Democrats and Republicans alike. I would have liked to have heard the president talk more about worker training, workforce development. I think those are things empowering the states, governors and state lawmakers in both political parties to do more, and empowering the federal government to give up some of those things so that the states could do things that help people get the training they need to fill many of the careers that are available today, not only in Wisconsin but across the country. Those are things we can work together on.
So, and ideas are great, but what we have learned in the past 6 years is a lot of them are going nowhere. So I just wonder how the president might have gotten to the deal-making part of it, or is that not possible in the State of the Union?
Yeah, you don't do that in the State of the Union. He's presenting his platform.
At this point, shouldn't we think outside the box?
No. I mean, this is his chance to get in front of an audience of a third of the American people and to present his views. Now the question is what's happening behind closed doors. That's where the deals are going to be made.
I feel like we have said this after every State of the Union we've covered.
Here's the problem. When I was listening to Chuck, my reaction was, if you are the President Obama and you've been shut out for 4 years of doing anything at all because the agenda of the other side is to do nothing, then why would you reach out during the State of the Union address? I wouldn't. I would make the deal. Now, he's had conversations with the Republican leadership repeatedly over the last few weeks. I don't know how those talks are going.
I think that's
where this is going to get done, if it gets done.
But I think we need to be more specific. The problem isn't necessarily with the proposals he's putting forward. I think there is bipartisan support for things like community college, for instance, and infrastructure. The problem is with how do you pay for these proposals?
That's right.
Every single one of these, there is a wide disagreement between Republicans and Democrats. And so I guess my question for the governor is on things like infrastructure, for instance. There's an obvious need. The government, the Highway Trust Fund, is going to run out at some point in time. And then you have a proposal like the gas tax, potentially to increase the funds into the Highway Trust Fund. What can the Republican Party do necessarily to get on board replenishing the Highway Trust Fund to pay for infrastructure repairs? Where can there be commonalities between the two parties on something as basic as that?
Yeah.
Well, I think there are things about not only what can they do within Washington, but what can they do to work in partnership with the states, because I think amongst Democrat and Republican governors, there is a lot of common ground: workforce development, worker training, transportation, infrastructure, even empowering the states to do more in education and health care. Those are areas where we can work together on. And I just look at this president, you think back in the 90s when Bill Clinton had a Republican Congress on welfare reform and other issues, he found a way to get things done. You look a decade before that with Ronald Reagan working with House Democrats in many cases on things like national defense and tax reform policy. He found a way, even with a split Congress, to get things done. I think my hope is, for the good of the country, not just one party or the other, that this president will go beyond the rhetoric. He's got every right to lay out his party's agenda, but this is the State of the Union, not the State of the Democrat. And my hope is you'll find ways to do more than just grow the economy in Washington, but find ways to grow the economy in cities and towns and villages all across this great country.
So, Jeremy Peters.
Good morning, Governor. My condolences on that heartbreaking Packers loss.
Just rub it in a little bit more. It's still brutal.
No, I'm genuinely sorry. My mom is from Wisconsin. So I did want to ask you, though, switching gears slightly to foreign policy. I think one of the major political lessons of the last year has been how quickly and unpredictably world events can change course. And I wonder, what you think about a next president coming into the White House without any foreign policy experience, because, of course, one of the major knocks against President Obama from Republicans who say that his foreign policy has been ineffective is that he had none of that before he came to the White House.
Well, I think the most important thing in foreign policy is leadership. The knock on the president is not whether or not he had experience. I mean, Hillary Clinton had a lot of experience being the Secretary of State, but you look at most of the places where she played a direct hand, in Russia and the Middle East and other places around the world, and it's largely messed up right now. One of the most powerful foreign policy decisions I think that was made in our lifetime was one that Ronald Reagan made early in his presidency, where he fired the air traffic controllers, which would seem to be solely a domestic policy. But what it did was it showed our allies around the world that we were serious, and more importantly, that this ban to our adversary was serious. Years later, documents released from the Soviet Union showed that that exactly was the case. The Soviet Union started treating him more seriously once he did something like that. Ideas have to have consequences. And I think this president has failed mainly because he's made threats and hasn't followed through on them.
All right, Governor Scott Walker, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. Good to have you on the show. We want to get